Hello and welcome back to the Nintendo Power Checklist hosted by me, Dr. Gakman. We are now in the year of 1998, starting with volume 104. So, see that here? This is January 104, Yoshi's Story on the cover. And then there's the back cover. So, there was a subscriber bonus. It says, Subscribers Only Insider Collector's Edition. So that's the back cover, but you'll notice it's upside down. So the section of the magazine that is for subscribers only is all printed upside down, and here's the front of the magazine. So in the center, or the center fold I should say, is Yoshi's Story. On the back of the center fold there is Duke Nukem 64 levels printed. Near towards the back of the magazine, and as you can see, this is over here, this is right side up and this is upside down. 2 coupons, $5 off Mischief Makers or $5 off Tetrasphere. This was a subscriber bonus, as you can see. And here is January through June of the Diddy Kong Racing 1998 date book. It's a calendar. There's also this puzzle thing over here, but I think that was for newsstand and subscriber. I'm not too sure. And then here's the back end of the poster, which also has the back end, and as you can see, this is upside down now because I had to flip the magazine over to see the upside down part, and this is the back of the coupons. But it is July through December of 1998, the calendar, Diddy Kong Racing calendar. And then this is the inside of the back cover. Since it's upside down, you have to read it from the back going forward. And, there's some 64 stuff here, but for subscribers only, the Insider Bonus. And these are the contents of that. Next volume is 105. And this is February 1998. You got Hollywood Hulk Hogan on the cover with the gold Nintendo 64 controller. I believe I talked about this in the last video as a collector's note. The gold controller was first a Nintendo Power only controller. It had a sticker on it that said Nintendo Power. The gold logo that they used to put, black and gold, that they used to put on the pens, the lapel pens that you could get for being a subscriber. And then later, they made it available in the issue 100 of Nintendo Power Magazine, where you could buy it directly from there. And I think that still had the sticker on it. I don't know if it said 100 on it or whatever, but the controller was gold. But the original way to get it was there was a Mario Kart contest where you had to get the best times and blah blah blah. I think there was 100 winners or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but the people who had the best times on, like, there were the 5 best times on 10 different tracks, so that would be like 50. I don't know, maybe it was the 10 best times. I don't know, I can't remember the exact gist of it, but that was one way to get the original way to get the gold controller. Then later on, of course, they had a gold controller bundle in with the system. That was much later on when they repackaged a lot of systems to try to sell them, because they had a bunch of different, they had the fantastic colors and all that stuff. And then also Toys R Us was selling them exclusively separately. So, and the centerfold for this volume is Wario Land 2. And I love this Fighter's Destiny right here. Ryuji. It's not Ryu, it's Ryuji. Anyways, back of that centerfold is more Diddy Kong Racing stuff. We got magic codes that allow you to get like all kinds of modes opened up and features, blah blah blah. Next volume is 106. This is March 1998. You got 1080 snowboarding. And the centerfold here is Forsaken 64. I think it's just called Forsaken here, but it ends up being called, I believe, Forsaken 64. I could be wrong about that. Let me see here. No, my notes say just Forsaken. So, I don't know. Anyways, on the back of this centerfold is some Yoshi Stories levels. I love Yoshi Story. It was great. Love Yoshi. Next volume, as you can see, there's not a lot of goodies in a lot of these this year of magazines. They were kind of slowly going away from the Power Subscriber different editions and the extra goodies and stuff. I mean, there's still goodies, but they weren't calling it the Nintendo Power Club or Subscriber Club. I can't remember the exact naming of it, but you would know that from the last video. I should know that, but I don't know the exact naming. There's Scottie Pippen right there and Kobe Bryant. The Kobe Bryant's NBA Courtside is the cover. April volume 107 of 1998. Now, I don't know, they show this Game Boy camera here. When I go over the Pokemon was giving, or was about to give Game Boy a second wind, and then, you know, a third wind and fourth wind with things like Game Boy Camera and the printer, and then they had Game Boy Color and Game Boy Pocket. In Japan, they had Game Boy Light. Regardless of all that, there was a Nintendo Power Strategy Guide. It was a little miniature ones, but it was a separate guide. Not a lot of pages to it, but it was for the camera. So I don't think that was a pack-in. I think you had to get it separately. All of the lists, all the checklists that I had checked before never said that it came with it. I think you had to pay for it separately, or you got it as some kind of bonus or something, but not for being a subscriber or whatever. But also you'll see there's the Power Supplies catalog for spring 1998 is also inside this, which we'll see that in a minute. Here's Iggy's Wreckin' Balls for Nintendo 64, the centerfold. Then they also have the Platinum Plays. This is just an advertisement. Some of the games were calling them million sellers or Platinum Plays, or, you know, Player's Choice. Every company has had this when they sell a lot of copies. And what they did was they put this little gold Nintendo 64 metal, or whatever you want to call that, seal. And then the edge of the game box changed from yellow, or no, it was red, but they changed it to gold with those. And of course the cartridge, also the label has that too. A little collector's note. 1080 snowboarding. There's some tips there in the on the back of the centerfold. And then here's the Super Power Supplies catalog for spring 1998. This is when they introduce, maybe they didn't introduce it here, but I can't remember exactly. But I have all of these in a future video once I'm done with all the volumes, which will take more than a year from now because we're several years away from the end of Nintendo Power Magazine. I'm going to go over the guides and all the extra goodies, and I'm also going to go through the Power Supplies catalog items that I have gotten myself. And I have all of these. Peach is not here. She was added later. But there was bigger ones. I don't have the bigger ones, but I do have the... they're definitely larger than a keychain. They're like Beanie Babies. They're kind of like... they were called beanies. They weren't even called plushies. But I have all of those hanging from my ceiling here in my living room. Next volume, and it says right here, the end is near, renew inside. gone over this in past videos, and like I said, when I finish all of these the volumes, I will go through the different things that they did, the goofiness that they pulled to get you to resubscribe by printing stuff on the magazine, putting a sticker on the magazine, or even having wraparound covers that kind of ruin the magazine. Anyways, that doesn't ruin it too much for me, and I'm not going to get another volume of this. This is my own subscriber one. As you can see, my name and address there. Come stalk me. No, I said that before, and that's not funny. That's actually not where I live anymore anyway, so shut up. And the cover boy here is Major League Baseball featuring Ken Griffey Jr. That is the cover for, this is volume, 108, which is May 1998. The centerfold here is Quest 64, and here we see the beginnings of the Pokemon phenomenon there. Usually they had the Epic Center, or they had some other kind of thing right after the centerfold, and this was something that they started doing with Pokemon. But there's Quest 64 as the centerfold. On the back of the centerfold, we've got, oh boy, what is this? Quake 1 tips. As a little side note here, you'll notice there's sports games and first-person shooters. This was a sort of staple for Nintendo that is not their usual staple. They brought first-person shooters away from the PC and more to console gaming. I mean, you could say that with 007, James Bond, and you could say that with Perfect Dark. Both rare games, of course, but other companies followed suit with ones that were made just for Nintendo 64 or Nintendo 64 ports of older, PC games that used to be like keyboard and mouse type first-person shooters, but adapted them to controllers and the analog stick and everything else. I mean, that's something that's pretty crazy if you think about it. And also, Nintendo was not really known for sports, but they had some deals with Ken Griffey, with Kobe Bryant. They tried to do some other stuff. Of course, in the past, they had boxing with Mike Tyson, but all of those kind of fell by the wayside over time. There was second-party developers working on those games. I think it was Left Field Games and a couple other companies that would either get absorbed by Nintendo or, like I said, fall by the wayside. But they were second parties. And this was something that they kind of had a heads up on with the competition. The first-person shooters, the Star Wars games, the Tom Clancy type games, and sports games. But what's funny is that by the time the next generation hits, GameCube, Nintendo loses Rare, Nintendo loses first-person shooters. I mean, they're still there. There's Time Splitters and things like that. But they were no longer the hallmark of that. And effectively, the Nintendo 64 user base was split in half between the people who went to Xbox and the people who went to GameCube. Me being GameCube, of course, and Nintendo Power Magazine covering GameCube. That's way in the future. We'll talk about that another day. Here is Volume 109, which is June. We're halfway through the year of 1998. Banjo-Kazooie, which, oh my gosh, that is a game. That is, I mean, wow. Rare and Nintendo 64 were magic, and Banjo-Kazooie was magic. Here's the centerfold, which is wrestling games. That's another staple for Nintendo 64 too, over PlayStation at the time. Not to say that PlayStation didn't have sports and first-person shooters and all of that stuff, but the lean was more towards Nintendo 64 when it came to those types of games. And then you have E3 here, 1998, which, that's why I have a delay in making this video, because I'm concentrating on E3 of this year, which is now the year 2021. Anyways, there's WWF Warzone. That is the centerfold. On the back of the centerfold, we have Forsaken 64, which I keep referring to it as Forsaken 64. I can't remember if it was actually was called Forsaken 64 or if it just was Forsaken. I'll have to look that up. And I'm already seeing spelling errors on the on my web page that has the text version of this checklist here. So, and here is Warzone again as the cover for July 1998, volume 110. Wow, think about that. 110. And here's the centerfold, Buck Bumble. Other companies were trying to cash in on the movie license stuff. That's another thing that kind of really started big with Nintendo 64 as 3D graphics started hitting. And at the time, people were thinking this is realistic and blah, blah, blah. It's not, but there you go. More movie tie-ins started happening, and Mission Impossible was one of those ones where they were like, oh, well, James Bond did well. Well, James Bond did well because it was a well-developed game by Rare, and it also brought to the forefront of console gaming first-person shooters, which was kind of a new thing for console gaming at the time. So, I don't know why I'm pointing out Mission Impossible, except for that it's just here underneath the centerfold. On the back of the centerfold, this is another kind of staple for Nintendo 64, and role-playing games definitely were a big thing on PlayStation. Role-playing games from Super Nintendo, the developers, the franchises, the publishers, they all ran to PlayStation. FMVs, the larger storage space, the audience was there because of Sony's marketing and leveraging and stuff. So the Nintendo 64 kind of lost that. But in that, there was the niche of, things like, I don't know, the Japanese version of The Sims, or the Japanese take on simulation farming, home life. You got things like Animal Crossing, Harvest Moon, River King. These were things that were kind of staples for Nintendo. And here you've got Harvest Moon. Now this is the Game Boy version of the game. It's called Seasons. Well, no, it's not called Seasons. This is just read my notes wrong. This is actually the Seasons from the Game Boy version of Harvest Moon. Now, I mentioned Animal Crossing before. That is a Nintendo 64 property. It started on 64, but it didn't come to America until GameCube, which was basically, some people looked at the GameCube game and they're like, wow, this is really, ugh. Well, that's because it was a port of the Nintendo 64 version of the game. It was not super advanced. It was advanced in the type of game that it was and what it was doing with the clock and seasons and time of year and all of the different things that you could do with it. But graphically, it was not, it was not something, and that's one of those things that some Nintendo franchises or some franchises as a whole just they're not pushing the graphics envelope. It's more about the art style, especially with games like Harvest Moon here too. So, Bomberman Hero. Bomberman 64 was amazing. That's my favorite Bomberman because I like the bomb physics in it. And it's 3D, but it also has two-dimensional layouts like the old school Bomberman. But, and since the Bomberman 64 did so well, they started making a lot more Bomberman games on Nintendo 64. Hudson, HAL were also staples for Nintendo at this time. This is August 1998, Volume 111, Volume 111. Nice. And the centerfold here is You Gotta Catch 'Em All with Fat Pikachu. This is before they really, I think this is right before the anime came out, or right around when the anime was about to come out, or it had already come out in Japan, of course. But yeah, you got the starters and all their evolutions coming soon to Game Boy. I mean, this was Nintendo really was. The Nintendo 64 was not Super Nintendo or the NES before it. PlayStation was beaten down with user base. They were beating them down, and with mind share, with market share, with money being made. So Game Boy, again, getting its second win because of Pokemon. You have a franchise that eventually Nintendo had to. There was a split. They made a split company, the Pokemon company, and it's the largest franchise in the world. And this is the humble beginnings of it hitting America here. So that's really cool. There's a little comic here. It's Keebler and Banjo-Kazooie. So on the back end of that centerfold of Pokemon, that legendary beginning is this is Wily Country Club, True Golf Classics. These are some courses here, some of the holes. And then packed in, this was a tear out, as you can see here, is the first issue, collector's edition. There's only one edition. That's the only one that they made. Volume 1 of Pokemon Power. Now, this is something that I believe the editor-in-chief at the time, who was right about Nintendo, who was right about Nintendo Power Magazine, who was right about a lot of things, was right about Pokemon. I mean, at this point, you've got near towards the end of the Super Nintendo's life, you had the Donkey Kong videos going out. Then you had videos for Pokemon going out that were sort of co-produced by Nintendo Power Magazine. And they have a little miniature magazine that it was a tear out. This would feature some of the manga. This would feature things about the upcoming anime in America, which at the time, I called it Japanimations, and I think a lot of people did at the time, but anime became the more mainstream name for it. I still call it Japanimations though, but you have to use the terminology anime for people to kind of like fully grasp what you're talking about there. But here is some maps and strategies, collecting tips, and Pokemon profiles in this first issue. And you got Ash. It's Angry Ash, and he's got the the grass badge on his hat. So I mean, this is early artwork. This is the beginnings of something gihugeous. And also in this was another tear out. As you can see, it was torn out. I ripped it up a little bit. They added beanies on the cover here. There's soundtracks. There's this case here for Nintendo 64, which was the same one that they sold for Super Nintendo. You could use it with either. The Super Power Supplies catalog for summer 1998. The beanies that they added were Mumbo Jumbo and Yo-Ho, Banjo and Kazooie. Next volume. We are now at September 1998. You got F-Zero X. Bring back F-Zero. Nintendo, come on, let's do this. That's the cover. And here is Turok 2, Seeds of Evil. Turok was another one of those things that the franchise was, it could have been bigger than it was. It was Acclaim's last really big acclaim to fame, you could say. Here are these. They had these that you could order from the Super Power Supplies catalog, but then Benson Dutch and Associates, BD&A, they had it to where like stores could actually sell these too. I never saw these really in stores, but they had these to where you could order them. And then here's a coming soon. They have the Link action figures, which the funny thing is Ocarina of Time, Zelda 64 at the time hadn't even come out yet. the big build-up this year was for Link, and you'll see that at the end of this video through Nintendo Power Magazine, and I'll show you that. Then here's Mission Impossible. What is this called? Yeah, the Mission Impossible Nintendo 64 game. There's some tips here for you on the back of the centerfold. And another tear out is the Volume 2 of Nintendo Power, or Pokemon Power. And here is another comic, kind of badly drawn, for Knife Edge, but here it is. This is, was it Titus that did this game? I can't remember who published it, but you could see this guy right here. I forgot. They used him as a sort of mascot there for a while, but this is a fold-out cover of the back cover, and then this is what the back cover looks like when the magazine is closed and you fold out the cover. And here it is. Yes, it's actually from Kemco. And I think that guy's name was Captain Kemco. Let's check that again. It's something goofy. I have to know this for personal reasons here. Blah, 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 Knife Edge, Lieutenant. Wow. I can't remember that guy's name. Anyways, there's that. Next volume. We are now at October 1998. Turok 2, Seeds of Evil on the cover. Zelda being explored. Now, Zelda was the big thing at the E3 that year. Nintendo was still doing Space World in Japan, which is kind of like the Nintendo version of E3 over in Japan at the time. Here's the centerfold. It's Sports College Hoops, 99. This was made, it says Nintendo 64, or in sports. They even made a video of that, a VHS that they sent out to people. And here is, this looks like it's perforated here, but I never pulled out any of the posters. All my centerfolds, I should say, are pretty much attached. There's maybe a couple of the earlier ones that you might have seen that were detached, but here is, it was made by Fox Sports Interactive. Back when there used to be competition for sports games and they weren't all bought up by EA. Unfair. Here is Bomberman. Tips here. This is for Bomberman Heroes. Or Bomberman Hero, I should say. And now we are on to, I love the googly eyes, Volume 3 of Pokemon Power. Tear out. And then finally, The Legend of Zelda with the gold foil right here. What do you call that? The font is gold foil. Ocarina of Time cover. And it says the biggest issue ever. It is pretty big. It's pretty thick. They made bigger ones since then, I think. But we'll go over that later on. Because that's in a future year. 1998 of... it's November of 1998, which is volume 114. And this has a fold-out front cover. It's just a little flap right here, though. But they go over all of these games, and Ocarina of Time is finally the cover. Pokemon was already hitting its stride so big in Japan that they announced the Game Boy Color. That's a big deal. Nintendo knew that this was a back and forth between... they wanted to have two successful platforms at once. Nintendo 64 was successful, don't get me wrong, but in Japan especially it was less successful. Even the Sega Saturn outsold the Nintendo 64 in Japan. And, there were still big games, and it was still big enough, but they needed something else to lean on, and Game Boy was that. But so they updated the Game Boy with Game Boy Color. And it's basically the same processor. It just has a color screen. Now, there were games that were made exclusively for it because it was a little bit more powerful, but it was basically, like I said, the same processor. I think it was a Z80 or whatever. Centerfold for this volume is Superman 64, or just Superman. Oftentimes referred to as Superman 64, though. There's NBA Jam 99. No. Anyways, Titus. Wow. I mean, this is... Whew. What to say about Superman that hasn't already been said. 64, that is. Here's some Banjo-Kazooie tips here. And let me see here. That's the back end of the centerfold. And then here is, to celebrate The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, it's all gold on all the other pages. Well, I can't really call it pages, but it's a fold-out poster, and you rip it out of the magazine, and then when you unfold it, the one side is gold with that one part of the page that says this, and then the other side of the poster is this. You got Sheik and Adult Link fighting off the hordes, so Stalfos and Lizalfos, and I forgot what they were all called, but these different things. There's Navi too. It's a fold-out poster. Nintendo Power Magazine. Awesome. Also a fold-out is the Nintendo Power, or Pokemon Power Volume 4. I don't think that they continue this into the next year. I think there was only 5 volumes of this. So by that point, Beckett was starting to, and Pojo and stuff like that were starting to make their own dedicated magazines for Pokemon. I mean, like I said, it was becoming huge. Nintendo would often do this when a console was a little waning a bit. They would sometimes release, instead of just having Nintendo Power Magazine, they would also have a side thing going, just in case, like, Nintendo Power had to go over to something else. Of course, that never happened. They still continued Nintendo Power Magazine, but they did this with the Game Boy Advance. The GameCube was under a lot of stiff competition. The Xbox came out around the same time, and there was actually some history there where Nintendo was second-guessing themselves as far as an American release. Of course, the GameCube did come out in America. It's not like it wasn't going to. It was just Yamauchi at the time, who was the president at the time of NCL, Nintendo Co. Limited. He was, not, I don't want to say threatening, but he was kind of making it out to be like, oh, they didn't even want to release it in America because, you know, Game Boy Advance was going to be their thing. And the Dreamcast was already coming out at this point, and he even said some unrealistic stuff about how the Game Boy Advance was more powerful than the Dreamcast, and so he was kind of out of touch. And he was on his way out, so don't worry there. I mean, that's history. It's in the past, so it doesn't matter. I love Yamauchi. Hiroshi Yamauchi. Yamauchi, however you want to pronounce it. He was the family Nintendo, basically. The company was in the family name, and he was all that was left of the family. Later on, it would be Iwata, and then, of course, we know about Iwata passing, and don't want to talk about that here. Here is the Nintendo Power Super Power Supplies catalog for winter of 1998, and that's when they introduced these figures. It was a figure 3-pack of Ganondorf, who represents power, Link, who represents courage, and Zelda, who represents wisdom of the Triforce. So, and then here is the last volume of the year, 1998, December, and it's Rogue Squadron. I talked about Star Wars before being kind of like a staple there for a while, as well as like things like Tom Clancy and first-person shooters and stuff, being a staple for Nintendo at this time. And when I say staple, I mean that those kind of games did better or were more prominent or more well-known on Nintendo 64 than they were on PlayStation. Pretty much everything was PlayStation at this point. But you had Nintendo, you had Rare, you had those other things that I talked about being staples for Nintendo. But role-playing games, just normal adventure and action games, survival horror started with PlayStation, of course. Well, started to become a part of the forefront of video games, with Resident Evil and Silent Hill and stuff. So, and that was something that Nintendo faltered therein. But here is the cover, Rogue Squadron, which would become a series for Factor 5, poor Factor 5. There's a history there. Look up stuff about Factor 5. It's love Factor 5's work, but it had a sad ending in my opinion. And then Global Tanks. This is also awesome. This is kind of funny. 3DO, there was the 3DO company. There was started by Trip Hawkins, who left EA, and he had the a company, and they also had, with Panasonic and some other companies, they made their own version of a home console called 3DO. But it was funny because the 3DO games and the games that were made by the 3DO company, they were, in my opinion, they were those games got more popular and were better on other systems, including Battle Tanks. Man, Battle Tanks is awesome. I love this game. 4-player. I don't think that they had a version of this on the 3DO system. I have to look into that, but I'll tell you, yeah, it was a great game. And then there was the Army Men series, which, I never really got into, but I know it was pretty popular. On the back end of that centerfold for Battle Tanks is Body Harvest. Now, here's some history here, too. This is made by DMA Designs, who later would go on to make Grand Theft Auto 3 for PlayStation 2, which ended up being the real killer app system seller for PlayStation 2, because we can talk about the history of Dreamcast versus PlayStation 2, but really, yeah, Grand Theft Auto was and still is a franchise to be reckoned with, and has always been a hallmark for PlayStation since Grand Theft Auto 3. So there's that. But Body Harvest was kind of like a precursor to that. Then you've got Pokemon Power. The last volume, I believe. I don't believe that they went into the next year with this. I could be wrong about that. We'll find out next month when I do the review for January through December of 1999. Wow, we're heading towards the year 2000. Yeah. Volume 5. And then there was some stickers. I thought that I had gotten these with the game when I got the game, but then I was like, wait a minute, no, this is Nintendo Power Magazine. And I found through past checklists in the past, this is way in the past that I came to this discovery, that this actually came with Nintendo Power Magazine. And then I talked about earlier in the video that Ocarina of Time was the big game for Nintendo 64. This was the thing that was going to save it and all this other stuff. Ocarina of Time, you got Final Fantasy VII fans over on PlayStation, and then you got, on Nintendo 64, you had Ocarina of Time. And, you got your blonde-haired, blue-eyed heroes, Cloud and Link, and I'll tell you, this was a staple for Nintendo. And here it is. They got rid of the staple binding, Nintendo Power Magazine, and they actually had the bindings for last year, which was Super Mario 64, and this current year, which is Link from the Ocarina of Time as the binding. So you can't really see the binding as well because I've bagged and boarded all my volumes. Some of them are a little misshapen or whatever. You're never going to have it perfect. But that's that. So thanks for watching. This was the year 1998 volumes, I believe, 104 through 115, January through December 1998 of Nintendo Power Magazine. Thanks for watching, and happy collecting out there.